Hello, everybody. I would like to welcome you today to our panel called Taking Stock Mandatory Detention Today. My name is Sarah Belal. I'm going to be the moderator. I run an organization called Justice Project Pakistan, which is based in Pakistan and represents Pakistani prisoners facing the harshest punishment at home and abroad. It is my pleasure and a privilege to be moderating this panel today. This is the second panel in a three-part series of dialogues with frontline and local leaders that will discuss the rise of mandatory detention, assess the current situation, and explain how a world without mandatory detention would look to everybody's benefit. And this is all going to be held within the framework of the UN 75 dialogues and as a part of the Cities Are Listening experience. This collective reflection ultimately aims at rethinking the current approaches that have proved inefficient and also to bring local, national, and international governments and institutions to an open discussion towards a community led vision for 2045 that puts people, care, and social justice at the center. So, the panelists today, who I will introduce shortly, are going to analyze the current state of mandatory detention. We're going to speak about its overuse, the disproportionate impact it has on the poor and minorities, and the history of reform attempts that fall short. Additionally, we're also going to discuss larger questions about public safety, such as do highly punitive law and order policies actually make a difference or make communities safer? And how has COVID 19 affected those in mandatory detention? And how has it affected the communities? So, without more talking from my end, I'd like to introduce our panelists. We have Teresa Njoroge, is the founder and director of Clean Start Solution, an organization in Kenya that provides women who have been incarcerated with support as they transition back into mainstream society. We will then hear from Yusuf Madad. He's the director of the association Relais, oh, I have to say this in French, Relais Prison Société, which supports minors in Morocco who are involved in the justice system to re-enter society and to prevent recidivism. We then have Uju Agomo, who is the executive director of Prisoners Rehabilitation and Welfare Action, which aims to promote security, justice, and development in Nigeria and other African countries through research, training, and provision of direct services to prisoners, formerly incarcerated people, youth at risk, and people who have survived torture. Last but not least, we will be hearing from Railda Alves, who is the founder and director of Amparar, a Brazil-based association that supports the families of detainees to defend their rights and those of the detained loved ones. So I'd just like to remind everybody that the presentations for each panelist will be approximately 10 minutes each. Please be conscious of the time limits because we want to make sure that everybody gets a chance to contribute. And the panelist presentations will be followed by a 15-minute moderated discussion and then a 15-minute question and answer where you can post your questions in the chat and I will be told which ones to ask. Technical guidance on interpretations and question and answers will be accepted through the chat function as well. So without further ado, I would like to ask Teresa to begin her presentation, please. Teresa, can we begin?
Sure. Thank you. Thank you, Sarah. There are over 700,000 women in detention across the world today. A few years ago, I was one of these women, wrongfully imprisoned, a mother with my infant daughter at the largest correctional facility for women here in Kenya, Langata Women Maximum Prison. In solidarity with our sisters who are in detention today and the formerly imprisoned women, I would like to express alarm at the rate at which the global female prison population is growing. The last decade, it has grown by around 100,000. And we're calling on governments to reduce the imprisonment of women and protect the rights of women who are in detention. Laws are normally there to keep us all safe and bring justice to the victims. But when we have laws that are unfairly targeting the poor, the vulnerable, the marginalized amongst us, then we're making decisions that have long-term adverse effects, which are sometimes permanent on the lives of those affected. The impact and effects of imprisoning a woman have devastating spiral social economic effects. The stigmatization that she has to carry the rest of her life, as well as her children who pay the price of the sentence, yet it's not a crime. When she's imprisoned, in most cases, these children are left by themselves. And then we have child-led households. These children end up dropping out of school, they end up in streets, and their path to institutionalization and into the juvenile justice system begins. All my colleagues, myself included, ended up with a custodial sentence, and yet it was our first time conviction. Never been convicted before, never been in any crime before. And this was not considered during mitigation, nor the fact that we were mothers whose children would be impacted by this sentencing. Needless to say, in my case, for instance, I ended up being cleared of any wrongdoing 2 years post-serving my full sentence. Is the criminal justice system living up to its name and mandate? We truly need to rethink the criminal justice system, and reform is not enough. It's normally so easy to reach out for tools that are readily available to fix what we're focusing on, but a new just world will require new imagination, new creation, new ideas. And from my experience, both while imprisoned and now, when working with formerly imprisoned women and other game changers in this ecosystem, it's clear that if our criminal justice system truly knew an incarcerated person's life story, we would not have the excessive sentencing we're seeing, the overuse of imprisonment. Instead, we would have trauma-based system to heal individuals that we as a society failed as children. You know, if we get hurt by a car accident, then you get sent to a physical therapy. But when you get hurt by physical abuse or sexual abuse or domestic violence and or poverty, you get sent to prison. 90% of women in prisons here in Kenya are mothers and the sole breadwinners. And this is the case not only in other African countries, but across the world. And a huge percentage of them should have been handed non-custodial sentences, given the fact that they are in because of petty survival crimes. If we take stock and profile the women we are imprisoning, it's the hawkers, the street traders, the homeless, the unemployed, the poor, those who did not have education opportunities nor economic opportunities. Is the solution imprisoning them? Do they cause any harm to society, warrant a custodial sentence? I think the COVID-19 pandemic has proven and shown otherwise. Prisons worldwide are being pushed to breaking point by the pandemic, as they can't handle the numbers. Social distancing has not been possible, and due to the overcrowding, they have had to decongest the prisons by releasing those in due to petty offenses. And this is the irony of it. We are still imprisoning the poor. and the vulnerable to date due to flaunting COVID-19 rules. Yet we totally understand the predicament they're in. We have women being imprisoned in Kenya today because of flaunting COVID-19 rules, leaving their children behind, the very children they went to fend for. And because they can't afford the fine of, say, about $200 and thereabout, they get short sentences of about 5 months. It really does not solve the solution of the problem that we're facing. We have just recently released about 10,000 petty offenders here in Kenya to decongest the prisons, and they're now rebuilding their lives in very difficult circumstances. And they shouldn't have been in prisons in the very first place. Yet we have resumed imprisoning fresh ones. Then comes this question: how did we arrive at the classification of petty offenses, what we call petty offenses? Because we're punishing people we should not be punishing. When did poverty become a crime? Poverty is not a crime. And I think taking stock of where we are at, I would say it's paramount to include people who are impacted by the criminal justice system in decision-making at all levels. And I'd like to commend OSF and the other players for including us, the impacted, in these conversations. Including us, listening to us is a huge step towards seeking the way forward. Those closest to a problem are closest to the solutions. Unfortunately, we are normally farthest from the resources. It's very clear that vast majority of those we imprison are in need of investment in education, jobs, and healthcare. Prisons are not stand-ins for healthcare or lack of jobs and employment. We need to end the harsh sentencing and punitive policies. Invest in us also as impacted leaders. Build us so we don't fail. It's an important part of rethinking the criminal justice system. Invest in aftercare, transition, and reintegration, especially the African governments. One can go through all the programs prisons has to offer, but with no money or opportunities post-release, it is all for nothing. Let us look for holistic solutions. People in detention today should have been released years ago. It's not about the amount of time one spends in prison, but the restoration of one's needs that ensures everyone's safety. I think we also need to hold people behind bars accountable. I have never seen anyone being told to say sorry for the crime they committed or being held accountable and make amends. We just hold people in prison, you know? And here in Kenya, for example, there's a very horrible habit of people getting arrested on a Friday, and then when they are arraigned in court, the arresting officers say they need about 15 days to complete investigations. Why not complete the investigations and then arraign the person in court if need be? I think I would conclude by saying it is time now to seek solutions that make sure that justice, dignity, equality, and human rights protection prevail. Thank you so very much for having me.